Hello. Today we'll be looking at the different types of effects racks, instrument racks, and audio racks that you get in Ableton, how the racks work, how you put them together, and what the functions are within the racks. So we'll just have a look first then at instrument racks. An instrument rack can be found here in Instruments Instrument Racks. You can drop and drag it in here. Another method of doing this, so we can drop this in like this, or another method of doing it is to have the instrument already on the track. Here I'm on a MIDI track, and then right click and group. That has the same effect. You then end up with your instrument in a rack. So let's go very quickly through the basic functions of a rack. You have here these icons. If we click this one here, it opens our macros. We have a possibility of 16 macros. We click the plus or minus here to change the values. 16 macros we can use. We also have a possibility to make variations of these macro positions and save them as snapshots. Then we have something called the chain here, which we'll come to a little bit later in the video. This is a way of combining multiple racks within a rack. We'll come to that as well. Okay, so let's close that quickly. And this one here opens the instrument, closes it. We have the possibility to randomize these macro settings. So let's have a look how we would do that. First of all, we have to go into our mapping. This map here allows us to select various parameters on the instrument we're using and map them to these macros. As an example, we can click on here on the frequency. It's highlighted now, and we could map it to macro 1. If I wanted to adjust these values, if I didn't want my frequency range to go so high to 20,000 for the filter, maybe I wanted to have more of a lo-fi effect, I could drag this down or type in a value. Let's put in 12,000, and that means we would only go to 12 kilohertz. So if I come out of the mapping now, you will see that my filter on the instrument is limited to 12 kilohertz. So I can make these settings. I could adjust the bottom value, maybe 60 hertz. I can constrain all of these things on the instrument by setting values within the mapping. Okay, so that's one little tip here. The next one is that I don't have to have just one thing mapped to one macro. If I go back into my mapping again, I could, if I wanted to adjust my frequency, maybe I wanted to also adjust the high pass frequency. And perhaps I didn't want it to go too far. Maybe it only wanted to go to 100 hertz. So as I now adjust, let's look at it. As I now adjust here the low pass, it also affects the high pass here. So I can have two things or multiple things mapped to one macro. Notice the name has changed though, because I've no longer automatically names it. If I go here, I can rename this filters. Just right click and you come into this menu. I could change the color of it. Give it a color, I don't know, nice blue. And so I can do this for all of these here. So we'll take one more example. We'll map here the resonance, map that to macro 2, the attack, decay. That'll do for now. Okay, so as I say, right click to rename or to color. I'll give this the same blue. This one's the envelope. I might want a different blue here. And once I have these four, now the randomize function would work. So if we open up our variations here, if I randomize this now, I get different positions generated for all of these parameters. If I like a position, like the sound of it, I can just create a new variation here. Let's call this Vary 1. If I tweaks this, if I tweak this a bit and I thought, oh, I prefer this kind of filter sound, then I don't have to make a new variation. I just click on this little camera icon here, and that has now put that into variation 1. Let's say I made another variation. I have a star here I could update, or I can create new. Let's call this, rename Vary2. And now I can double click and jump between these variations. So it's almost like a preset function. Okay, this little icon here allows me to swap things out. This just allows you to swap out the instrument rack if you wanted to put a different rack in. This would change this whole rack, including drift everything. If we wanted to save what we've done now, we can click on this icon here, and this will save it into your user library. Let's have a look under presets. Let's close this up. You come to here, user library, presets, instruments, and instrument rack, and it would be saved in here. So if we right click here, we can rename this. Let's call it AAAB, I don't know. And then if I now save this, we have AAAB. Here's one I made earlier, AAAA. I can delete that. Move to trash. This one here, I could also delete. Move to trash. Now, it hasn't deleted it here. I could then resave it again, and there it is. Okay, so you can then drag these into a new project. So I could take this entire rack and drag it into, if I had here another MIDI track. Let's open this up. If I had here, I could drag this entire rack in here now. It's a copy. I have it on both tracks. Okay, that's also something you can do. Right, so let's go back then to our original rack and look at the next type of rack we have within Ableton. This was the instrument rack, so we'll delete this for now. The next type of rack we have is the audio effects rack. Now the audio effects rack, I'll drag this one in. It functions in identical manner, but only deals with audio effects. So we have the same controls here. We have the possibility to open up macros. We have snapshots. We have all these things. We can save it here. If we save it here, this one would appear not in instrument racks. We have to come out of here. This would appear in audio effects, audio effect rack. That would appear here. Presets, audio effects rack, if I press the save here. Now, with this one, we can put something at the front here. We could put our instrument again, and then run our effects through it. We could remove that. We could have, let's have an external instrument, something coming in on external channel, running through our effects. But for the moment, we'll just stick with drift, and we'll close it up. We don't need to look at it. So we have drift here. Now I have in here, depending on which version of Ableton you have, you'll have access to different effects depending on the version you have. Let's just put something very simple on that everybody has, which is a delay. I don't just have to put one effect here. I could also put a whole series of effects if I want. Let's put maybe a reverb. So I can build up these large chains of effects, and we'll go a little bit deeper on this a bit later on in the video when we come to chains, how you can create multiple effects channels if you like. But okay, these work as well in the same way. I can map things. I could map here maybe the dry wet of the delay. I could map the sync rates here. I can now adjust these here from the control. Dry wet. I could also take from the reverb. I could take the, let's have the decay here. So same principle, you just select what you want. You can use multiple things on one macro as well. So now I have, okay, So I think you get the idea. So that's identical. If I find settings here I like from my effects rack, again, create a new variation, and the same principles apply. So those are the same as an instrument rack. Okay, so the next rack we have, let's delete this, we'll keep drifting here, is a MIDI rack. To get a MIDI rack in here, we just drag and drop this in here. And now this deals with MIDI effects, things like arpeggiators or chord functions or whatever. So let's drop here at the front. Notice this is before the instrument. The effects come after the instrument, and the instrument rack is its own thing. Same controls. We have the same access to macros, snapshots, all those things identical. When we save this one, it appears in your user library, but not in audio effects. It'll appear, let's come out of here, presets, MIDI effects, MIDI effect rack here. So it would appear in here. Okay, so here we can now have effects. We don't just have to have one. We can, let's go back to our MIDI effects. Perhaps I'd put a chord on this as well and drop it in the rack. So again, you can combine multiple things, and again, you can save this into your user library and drop it onto multiple tracks. It's something you can reuse. We can again map, let's just map here the rates, all the same functions as we had in the previous racks we looked at. Okay, so those are the three basic racks. Let's come out here, clear this again. Now we'll go back to the special function of the instrument rack, and that is if I take another instrument, let's take analog this time. We'll drop analog in here, and let's put some reverb on analog. And perhaps at the front, we again want to have our arpeggiator. So now we have arpeggiator with reverb. Okay, wonderful. Everything we want. What kind of rack can we put these all in? Because this has effects, instrument, and MIDI effects. Well, if we select these by holding the Shift key and just clicking on them, and now we group them, we find that they all land here in an instrument rack. So instrument racks have the possibility of combining all of the different types of effects we have, MIDI, normal effects, and instruments together. And again, we can map individual things from individual instruments or effects and map them all here. We can go to our decay here on the reverb. So we can have all of these things here mapped in here. Again, we can set our constraints. If we don't want such a large reverb time or whatever, we can do all of these things from our instrument rack. This can again be renamed. We could call this analog rack 1. I don't know. And then save this as a complete instrument effects rack. This would appear then again under user library. If we save it here, it'll appear again as an instrument rack this time. So it'll appear in here if we were to save it. So presets, instruments, instrument rack, that's where that would appear. Okay, so what else could we do? Well, now we're getting into the area of expanding the racks and making more complicated racks. And that's where we can use the chain function. So let's have a look at that. Right, so we have here our arpeggiator, our analog, we'll just close him up, and the reverb. We have the three things in here. If we go and click here now, this little icon here, we bring up the chain. And here, this is where it gets quite good. You can right-click this entire rack, and we can duplicate it. Now we have duplicates. So let's call this analog. Well, actually, I find it's always best to rename. Oh no, we'll do it here. We'll rename it here. We'll rename this here analog 2. Rename analog 1. Now we have copies. When we play, we will have double the volume level because we have double the signal going through. So you might find you have to adjust these, take a little bit off of each to find the balance. Now a trick I have for this is if I mute this one, actually I'll show you my trick. If I have if I just hold this down, a double click here, I can see through one I'm getting -10 decibels, -11. When I have both on, I'm -6, -5. So what I would do is I would adjust these and keep double clicking here. Maybe -5, it's -5 for both. Let's try that. Yeah, that's about right. So I would use this trick to set my levels here. So I effectively have the same signal level as from one. But anyway, that's a little trick you can use. Now, this is the chain now. I have 1 and 2. Why would I want this? Well, we can set this up now. Let's say, let's go and have a look at analog maybe. That's the best example we could use here perhaps. We'll have a look at analog in both of them. Close the arpeggiator. And let's say here we have some controls as well. We have the pan. So I can map these as well. I can go in here, I can map the pan for both of these. I could map the on-off if I wanted to, or the volume level. I can map all of these things here, or whatever. These can all be mapped here. So now I can have a left and right pan. Pan 1, rename, pan 2. So straight away I've opened up the possibilities. And remember, they've all got reverb on them. You can't have a separate, when you have a chain, it's not possible to have, let's say, the 2 arpeggiators and 2 analog and only 1 reverb. You have to have whatever effects you want on here. I don't have to have a reverb on this one. I could have a delay. So we're on analog 1 now. Let's go and drop an audio effect in here. Let's take a delay here. So I now have 1 channel 1 with delay, 2 with reverb. Which sounds a bit weird, but it is possible. So you can set up individual instruments for these things. Now let's go back to what we had before. I'll just revert to the reverb. So we now have reverb on both. And let's set this one up. How can we do this now? What's the best thing? Well, we have this one mapped here. So let's just listen to analog 1 at the moment. We'll put it in the center. So we can adjust analog 1. Maybe I wanted a different. Let's turn down the reverb a little bit. Okay, so we have this sound here on analog 1. On analog 2 now, if I go here, I could press a solo if I wanted to. We have this, so let's change the arpeggiator on this one. Maybe we'll change our rate to, try them together. What have we got? Oh, I have them both mapped. Okay, I should have mentioned, when you duplicate, if I duplicate this, then it actually carries over all of the macro settings. I should have mentioned that before. So when I duplicated the first one, I'll show you that again. We'll delete this one. So we have here our macro settings. This is all mapped to analog 1. If I now right click and duplicate this and look at my mapping, you'll see that analog 1, I have to rename this now so we can see it clearly, analog 2. Yeah, so you can see that analog 1 and analog 2, all the mapping has been taken over. Arpeggiator, sync rate, analog 1, arpeggiator. So you actually don't have to do that work to remap them. So let's delete analog 2 arpeggiator. Let's remove these here. We'll remove that, the chain panorama. We'll remove analog 2 from here. So we just have analog 1 mapped here. So that's analog 1 mapped here. Now, if I wanted analog 2 mapped here at the bottom, I could take the same thing. I could go here and do sync rate, put it down the bottom here. We can have the same thing, the filter. Where was that here? Frequency, we can map that here. The resonance, let's close this for a second. We can map here. Try that again. Resonance, we can map here. So we can duplicate these things. That'll do for now. Okay. So now let's we'll do one more. We'll map here. Let's rename, delete that so we don't get confused. We'll put the pan here as well. So we'll map this one down the bottom and we'll rename this pan 2. Okay, so now we have the same controls effectively. We can come out of the mapping. We have the same controls apart from the decay here. So let's just grab the decay level from the reverb here to be consistent. So we have the same controls. This is 1, and let's just rename this A1 sync, and we'll call this A2 sync, so we know A2 sync. Okay, so we have the same controls. One is analog 1, one is analog 2. Now, so what other functions do we have here? Well, we can, if we want, set these up, as I mentioned before, to have different sounds. And different rates, even different decay times. Pan them. Okay, so we can set up different sounds, but let's look a bit closer. Let's take analog 2. Let's change this one back to a saw. We have 2 distinct sounds now. Well, what do we have here? So we have here the key as an example now. And we can see here we have the range across the keyboard up here. And we have these 2 green bars. And what we can do here then is if we wanted to, let's say, split our keyboard, we could move this one up to C3. This is analog 1, range C3 to C8, and we can move this one down to be below it. So we can split these instruments across the keyboard. Now, let's have a look what we have. Play C3, I get this instrument. Play C2. So this allows us to set up splits for different instruments we might have. So if we want to have a bass below or whatever, this can be done in the key range here. The next one we have, let's reset these back to their original full length. The next one we have is the velocity, and this works in the same principle but doesn't split it across the keyboard like a keyboard split. What this does is it depends on how hard you hit the key, the velocity that you play the key. So I could have this instrument here, analog 2, only coming in when I have a velocity up to a level of 56 or very low 50. So, and this one above or combined, however I want to lay these out. So I can have these split as well. So if I play different velocities, I get a different sound. So you could imagine if we had 3 or 4 instruments here, you could effectively set up like a type of round robin where, depending on how you play, the strength you play the key, you would get a different sound. So that's another useful little function here. Okay, so the final one we have is the chain. And this is a little bit more tricky to understand. Yeah, this allows you to define zones within for the instrument. So let's say we want to bring this up to 64, and we will pull this one all the way up here to the back here, and we'll come down with this one. There we go. Down to 65. Now we have 2 zones here. What does that mean? Well, you see now, when I play the keyboard, I'm only playing, and I'm playing here C2, in the C2 range, C2 to C3. If I play the keyboard, then I'm only playing one instrument. If I move this little dial up here, so this is also another way of setting up splits. And here we can, and this I should have shown you also in the other 2. You can also, if you just get the right setting here, you can fade here. So you can have zones where we can effectively play both. Now, the difference between this and a key split is this isn't affected by the keys. This is affected by where the position of this dial is, if you like, is a dial here. So if I move the dial here, I play this instrument, analog 2. If I move it here, I play both. If I move it here, I just play analog 1. So we can map this actually. If we go into our mapping, we could map this to a macro. As an example, we'll map it here, the chain selector. And now when I come out of here, I can move this through the instruments, both playing together. So it's another way of defining where the instruments play. It's quite useful when you want to set up, well, you'd have to look at some of my other videos, but I've used this quite a lot to set up instruments in particular ways, especially working with samples where the samples would only play over a certain range or whatever. Okay, so that's that. And let's reset these as well. You can drag from both sides actually. You don't have to come this way. You can drag from both, overlap how you want. But we'll just reset these quickly. Okay, so as I say, this is controlled now by this. If we go back to the key as well, I should have shown you here, you also have this option to fade on the key. You can do that, and on the velocity as well. So you can have zones where you have both playing at the same time. That's possible as well. Okay, so those are the 3 main types of rack you have within Ableton. There is a 4th one, which is also an important rack, but I'm not going to get into in this video. Perhaps I'll do a second one. And that is the drum rack here, which shares many of the characteristics of the other racks, but has its own specialities. I won't get into that here, but I hope the information I've given you has been useful and that you can make use of it for understanding how to use the racks within Ableton Live. If you made it this far, thank you for watching and take care.